They beat my wife. Harold Mitchell collapsed to his knees in the middle of Maple Avenue. His cane clattered against asphalt. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. Behind him, inside the house with the broken door, Margaret was still screaming. 7 motorcycles stopped dead. The Hells Angels had just found their reason to stay. If you believe in loyalty, justice, and the power of strangers, subscribe now, watch until the end, and comment your city below. Let me see how far this story reaches. Harold's knees hit concrete. Pain shot up his spine. That old familiar agony he'd lived with for 30 years. His cane rolled away. His hands scraped against the road. He didn't care. "Help!" his voice cracked. "Somebody help me!" Nothing. Houses lined both sides of Maple Avenue. Nice houses, clean lawns, American flags, and behind every window, faces watching. Nobody moving. Harold slammed his fist against the ground. "My wife is bleeding. She's 70 years old. What's wrong with you people?" A curtain twitched at number 1842, Mrs. Patterson's house. Harold saw her face for half a second before she disappeared. Coward. They were all cowards. The rumble started low. Harold barely heard it over his own ragged breathing. Then it grew louder, closer, the kind of sound that vibrated in your chest. Motorcycles. He looked up. 7 bikes, 7 riders, leather vests, patches, chains, Hell's Angels. Harold's stomach dropped. The lead rider killed his engine. Massive guy, bald head, scar running from eyebrow to cheekbone, arms covered in ink, skulls, flames, wings. He swung off his bike like he owned the street, because he probably did. "Hey," the giant's voice was gravel. "Old man, what happened?" Harold tried to stand. His legs wouldn't cooperate. "My wife," the words caught in his throat. "2 men. They broke into my house. They beat my wife." The biker didn't blink. "Where are they now?" "They ran, east, toward the warehouses." "How long ago?" 20 minutes, maybe 30. The giant turned to his crew. 6 men, all watching, all waiting. "Razor, Tank, with me." 2 riders nodded. "The rest of you, stay here. Watch the house." A younger guy with a mohawk stepped forward. "Boss, come on, this ain't our—" "Demon," the giant's voice dropped to ice. "Did I ask?" Demon shut his mouth. Harold finally got one leg under him, then the other. His whole body shook. "Wait," he gasped. "Wait, you're going after them?" The giant was already walking back to his bike. "What's your address?" 1847, the one with roses. Something flickered across the biker's face, gone before Harold could read it. "Name?" "Harold. Harold Mitchell." "Brick," the giant pulled on his helmet. "We'll be back." 3 engines roared to life. 3 bikes tore down the street like thunder chasing lightning. Harold stood frozen, watching until they disappeared. What the hell just happened? "Yo, old-timer." Harold spun around. Demon was walking toward him, hands up, palms out. "Easy. I'm not gonna hurt you." "Then what do you want?" "Brick said watch the house, so that's what we're doing." Demon gestured toward Harold's front door, hanging crooked on broken hinges. "Your wife still in there?" Harold's heart seized. Margaret. He'd left her alone. He'd run out into the street screaming for help, and he'd left her alone. "Move," Harold snapped. He grabbed his cane and half ran, half limped toward the house. His legs screamed. He ignored it. 30 feet. 20. 10. The door was destroyed. Splintered wood, bent metal, boot prints on the frame where they'd kicked it in. "Margaret!" Silence. "Margaret!" "Harold?" A small voice, weak, terrified. "Harold, I'm here." He burst through the doorway. She was on the floor, not the couch, the floor, curled up in the corner like a wounded animal. Her left eye was swollen shut, purple bruise spreading across her cheekbone, blood on her lip. arms covered in red welts. Harold's vision went white. Oh, God! He dropped beside her, hands hovering, afraid to touch. Oh, God, Margaret! I'm okay. She wasn't okay. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm okay, Harold. You're not okay. Look at you. Look what they did to you. Tears spilled down her face. I tried to stop them. They pushed you down, and I tried to stop them, and they... Don't. Harold pulled her gently into his arms. Don't talk. I'm here. I've got you. She sobbed against his chest. 43 years of marriage. 43 years of loving this woman more than his own life. And he couldn't protect her. His broken body, his useless legs. He couldn't do the one thing a husband was supposed to do. He'd never hated himself more.
Mr. Mitchell?
Harold looked up. Demon stood in the doorway, face pale. Jesus, the young biker breathed. They really did a number on her. Get out. Sir, I said get out. Demon didn't move. His jaw tightened. No. Harold blinked. What? Brick said watch the house. Brick said keep you safe. That's what I'm doing. Demon pulled out his phone. I'm calling for supplies, ice packs, bandages. You got any allergies I should know about? Harold stared at him. This kid, this tattooed, leather-wearing kid with a demon inked on his throat, was asking about allergies. No, Harold heard himself say. No allergies. Good. Scraps. A skinny young man appeared behind Demon. Couldn't have been older than 20. Yeah? First aid kit. Now, check their bathroom. Scraps nodded and disappeared down the hall. Margaret was trembling in Harold's arms. Harold, she whispered, who are these people? I don't know, sweetheart. He held her tighter, but I think they're trying to help. 20 minutes. That's how long it took to get Margaret off the floor, onto the couch, and wrapped in a blanket. Ice pack on her eye, bandages on her arms, a glass of water in her shaking hands. Demon stood guard at the broken door. Scraps swept up broken glass. A third biker, older, with a permanent smirk and playing cards tattooed up his arms, was examining the damage to the coffee table. Joker, Demon called. Can you fix that? Maybe. Need wood glue, some clamps. Check the garage. Harold watched them work. Watch these strangers, these supposed criminals, move through his home like they belong there. Margaret squeezed his hand. This is insane, she murmured. I know. The Hell's Angels are cleaning our living room. I know. What do we do? Harold looked at her battered face, at the fear still lingering in her one good eye. We let them. Engines. Harold's head snapped toward the door. 3 motorcycles pulling up outside. 3 riders dismounting, and between them, 2 figures stumbling, tripping, being shoved forward. Harold stood. Stay here, he told Margaret. Harold, stay here. He limped to the doorway. Brick was dragging a young man by the collar. Mid-20s, snake tattoo on his neck, face bloody, nose probably broken. Razor had the other one. Red cap, dirty now, crumpled. The kid was crying. Derek and Kyle, the men who'd beaten his wife. This them? Brick's voice was flat, dangerous. Harold's hands curled into fists. Yes. Brick threw Derek to the ground. The kid hit grass, rolled, tried to scramble up. Tank planted a boot on his back. Stay down. Derek stayed down. Please, Kyle was sobbing, snot running down his face. Please, we're sorry, we didn't mean... Razor slapped him. Not hard, just enough to shut him up. You didn't mean what? Brick walked slowly toward Kyle. Each step deliberate. Didn't mean to break into an old man's house? Didn't mean to steal his money? Didn't mean to beat his wife? We needed cash, man. We owed people. We didn't have a choice. Wrong answer. Brick grabbed Kyle by the throat, lifted him clean off the ground. The kid's feet kicked helplessly. You always have a choice. Brick said quietly. You just made the wrong one. He dropped Kyle. The kid crumpled, gasping. Harold watched. He should feel something. Satisfaction, vindication, something. All he felt was empty. Mr. Mitchell. Harold looked up. Brick was standing in front of him. Your wife, how is she? Alive. Harold's voice was hollow. Bruised, scared, but alive. Brick nodded slowly. These two. He gestured at Derek and Kyle. What do you want done with them? What? It's your call, your house, your wife. Tell me what you want. Harold stared at him. No one had ever asked him that before. No one had ever given him power over anything since the accident took his legs. I want, he stopped, swallowed. I want them to understand. Understand what? What they did, what they took from us. Not just money. We don't care about the money. They took our peace, our safety. My wife is 70 years old, and now she's afraid to be in her own home. Brick was quiet for a moment. That can be arranged. Get up. Derek scrambled to his feet. Kyle tried, failed. Tank hauled him up by the collar. Brick positioned them in the middle of the front lawn, visible to every neighbor still watching through their windows. Kneel. They knelt. You see these houses? Brick swept his arm across the street. Every single person in them watched your victims suffer. Every single one of them hid instead of helping. You know why? Derek shook his head frantically. Because they were scared of you. Two punk kids with nothing but fists and attitude, and a whole street full of grown adults were too scared to stop you. Brick leaned down until his face was inches from Derek's. How does that make you feel? Powerful? Derek was shaking too hard to answer. Let me tell you how you should feel. Brick's voice dropped to a whisper. Ashamed. Because you didn't win today. You didn't prove you were strong. You proved that this neighborhood is weak. That nobody cares about anybody anymore. That an old man can scream for help in the middle of the street and not a single person will answer. He straightened. Except us. The front door opened. Harold turned. Margaret stood in the doorway, blanket around her shoulders, one eye swollen shut, but standing. Margaret, you should be. I want to see them. Her voice was steel. Harold had never heard that voice before. 43 years of marriage, and he'd never heard Margaret sound like that. She walked past him, down the porch steps, across the lawn, until she stood directly in front of Derek and Kyle. They wouldn't look at her. Look at me. They looked. Margaret stared down at them with her one good eye. I'm 70 years old, she said quietly. I have arthritis in both hands. I can barely lift a gallon of milk. And when you pushed my husband, when you put him on the floor, I still tried to fight you. Because that's what love does. It makes you brave even when you're weak. She paused. You're not brave. You're not strong. You're just two boys who never learned that actions have consequences. Derek started crying again. Today, Margaret continued, you learn. Brick looked at her with something like respect. Mrs. Mitchell, what would you like done with them? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. I don't want them in prison, she said finally. Prison won't teach them anything except how to be better criminals. Then what? I want them to work, here, for us. I want them to fix what they broke. And I don't just mean the door. I want them to understand what they destroyed today. Our sense of safety, our peace, our trust. She looked at Brick. Can you make that happen? Brick smiled. For the first time since Harold had met him, the giant actually smiled. Ma'am, he said, it would be my genuine pleasure. Here's how this works. Brick grabbed Derek by the collar and yanked him to his feet. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., you show up here with tools, supplies, and a new attitude. You fix that door. You fix that table. You fix whatever else needs fixing. Yes, sir, Derek's voice was barely audible. And every weekend for the next 6 months, you come back. Yard work, groceries, whatever the Mitchells need, you become their personal assistants. Understand? Yes, sir. Brick turned to Kyle. Same goes for you. Kyle nodded frantically. Yes, sir. Whatever you say, we'll do it. Good. Brick released Derek. Now empty your pockets. The money came out immediately. Crumpled bills, trembling hands. $53, Razor counted. 6 more than they stole. Brick handed the cash to Harold. Harold stared at it. $47, that's all it had taken. $47 to shatter his wife's face, to destroy their front door, to steal their peace. I don't want it. Brick raised an eyebrow. Keep it, Harold said. Give it to someone who needs it. A family struggling with bills. A kid who can't afford lunch money. Whatever. Margaret and I don't want anything these two touched. Brick studied him for a long moment. You're a good man, Harold Mitchell. I'm a tired man. There's a difference. Get out of here. Brick shoved Derek toward the street. Both of you. And remember what I said. 8 a.m. tomorrow. If you're late, if you don't show, if you ever touch another elder as long as you live. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Derek and Kyle ran. Actually ran. Tripping over each other in their desperation to escape. The street was silent. Harold felt Margaret's hand slip into his. Is it over? She whispered. I don't know. He squeezed her fingers. I think so. Harold? Yeah? I want to go inside now. Okay, sweetheart, let's go inside. They didn't make it 3 steps before Brick's voice stopped them. Mr. Mitchell, Harold turned. We're not done yet. What do you mean? Brick gestured to his crew. Demon, Scraps, Joker, Razor, Tank. 5 men standing in Harold's front yard like they belonged there. Boys, let's fix this place up. Harold opened his mouth to protest. Brick cut him off. You got tools in that garage? Yes, but paint? 3rd shelf, behind the... Good. Brick was already rolling up his sleeves. Demon, grab the toolkit. Scraps, you're on door duty. Joker, keep working on that table. Tank, I'll handle food. The massive biker was already walking toward the house. Mrs. Mitchell, you got stuff in the fridge I can work with? Margaret blinked. Yes, there's chicken, some vegetables. Perfect. I make a mean soup. He disappeared inside. Harold stood frozen on his own lawn, watching the Hells Angels take over his home. What is happening? He muttered. Margaret laughed. It hurt. He could see it hurt, but she laughed anyway. I have no idea, she said, but I think I like it. 2 hours later, Harold sat on the couch, Margaret tucked against his side. Her breathing had finally steadied. The trembling had stopped. She was almost asleep. Around them, the house transformed. Scraps had replaced the front door entirely, found a spare in the garage that Harold had forgotten about. Joker rebuilt the coffee table so well it looked better than before. Demon patched the hole in the wall that Derek had made when he'd shoved Harold into it. And in the kitchen, Tank, 280 pounds of tattooed muscle, stood at the stove wearing Margaret's pink apron, stirring a pot of chicken soup. Brick sat in the armchair across from Harold. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Finally, Harold broke the silence. Why? Brick looked at him. You don't know us, Harold continued. You were just riding through. You could have kept going. Why did you stop? Brick was quiet for a moment. Then he reached up and touched the name tattooed over his heart. Helen. My mother, he said, died 12 years ago. Cancer. But before that, before the cancer, she spent 20 years with a man who put his hands on her. My father. He beat her the way those two beat your wife. And I was too young, too small to stop him. Harold didn't speak. I was 16 when I finally got big enough to fight back. 16 years old. And you know what I did? What? I broke his jaw, both arms, 3 ribs, put him in the hospital for 2 months. Brick's voice was flat. He never touched her again. But the damage was done. She was never the same. She flinched every time someone raised their voice. She apologized constantly for everything, even things that weren't her fault. She died scared, Harold. After everything I did, she still died scared. His hands curled into fists. I made a promise at her grave. I promised that I would never let someone hurt another woman the way she was hurt. Not if I could stop it. Not ever. He looked at Harold. When you screamed in that street, when you said they beat your wife, I heard my own voice. From 30 years ago. That helpless, desperate need to protect someone you love. So you stopped. So I stopped. Margaret stirred against Harold's shoulder. Harold? Her voice was sleepy. Who's that? Go back to sleep, sweetheart. Is that the man who helped us? Brick leaned forward. Yes, ma'am, I'm Brick. Margaret opened her one good eye, studied him for a long moment. You have kind eyes, she said finally. Behind all those tattoos, you have kind eyes. Brick blinked. For just a second, Harold saw something crack in that tough exterior. Something vulnerable, something human. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me, Margaret yawned. Just don't be a stranger. Harold needs more friends. All he does is watch TV and complain about his back. Harold sputtered. I do not. You do, Margaret patted his hand. It's okay. I still love you. Brick laughed, actually laughed. A real laugh, deep and warm. I like her, he said to Harold. Yeah, Harold looked down at his wife. Me too. The crew worked until midnight. By the time they finished, the house looked better than it had in years. Fresh paint on the walls, new door, fixed table, clean floors. Even the rose bushes out front had been trimmed. Who did that? Harold asked, pointing at the garden. Scraps raised his hand sheepishly. My grandma used to have roses. She taught me how to take care of them. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Oh, honey. She walked over and hugged him. The skinny young biker stood frozen, clearly not sure what to do with his arms. You're welcome? You're a good boy. Margaret squeezed tighter. Don't let anyone tell you different. Scraps looked at Brick, panicked. Brick just smiled. Better hug her back, kid. She won't let go until you do. Scraps awkwardly patted Margaret's back. She finally released him. One by one, the Hell's Angels headed for the door. Demon first, then Joker, then Razor. Tank gave Margaret a formal little bow before leaving, which made her laugh. Scraps waved awkwardly from the porch. Brick was last. He shook Harold's hand. Firm grip, callous palm. We'll be back, Brick said. Sunday, just to check in. You don't have to. I want to. Brick glanced at Margaret. Both of us want to. Harold swallowed the lump in his throat. Thank you, he managed. I can't. You don't have to say anything. Brick clapped him on the shoulder. Just take care of her. That's all that matters. I will. I know. The motorcycles roared to life. Harold and Margaret stood in their new doorway, watching 7 riders pull away from the curb. Brick raised a hand in farewell. Then he was gone. The street fell silent. Margaret leaned her head against Harold's shoulder. Harold? Yeah? Did that really just happen? I think so. The Hell's Angels just fixed our house and made us soup. Yep. And they're coming back on Sunday. Apparently. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Our kids are going to think we've lost our minds. Harold laughed. Probably. The neighbors are never going to look at us the same way. Definitely not. She tilted her face up to look at him. Even with the bruises, even with the swollen eye, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. I love you, Harold Mitchell. I love you too, Margaret Mitchell. Take me to bed. I'm exhausted. Yes, ma'am. Harold helped his wife up the stairs. Slowly, carefully, one step at a time. Her hand in his, her weight against his shoulder. 43 years of marriage, and somehow, tonight, it felt like the beginning of something new. Behind them, through the window, the lights of Maple Avenue flickered on and off as neighbors finally went to sleep. Tomorrow, the street would wake up different. Tomorrow, everything would change. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, Harold Mitchell held his wife close and let himself believe, for the first time in 30 years, that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Harold woke at 5:47 a.m. His back screamed, his legs throbbed. Every joint in his body felt like rusted metal grinding against bone. Normal morning. Except nothing about this morning was normal. He turned his head slowly. Margaret lay beside him, face half buried in the pillow. The bruises looked worse in the early light. Purple had deepened to black around her eye. The cut on her lip had scabbed over, but she was breathing, steady, peaceful. Harold watched her for a long moment. 43 years. 43 years of waking up next to this woman. And yesterday he'd almost lost her. Two strangers had walked into their home and put their hands on her, and he'd been powerless to stop them. His fists clenched under the blanket. Never again. He didn't know how. He didn't know what would change, but he made a silent promise to himself, lying there in the gray morning light. Never again. Margaret stirred. Her good eye fluttered open. "Harold?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "What time is it?" "Early. Go back to sleep." "You're staring at me." "I'm allowed. You're my wife." She smiled. Even with the bruises, even with the swollen eye, that smile still made his heart skip. "Charmer," she murmured. "You've always been a charmer." "Only with you." She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. "I had nightmares," she whispered, "all night. They kept coming back, breaking down the door, hitting me, and you were on the floor and I couldn't." "Hey," Harold caught her hand, pressed it against his chest. "I'm here. We're safe. Those men are never coming back. You don't know that." "I do." He thought of Brick, of the promise in those dark eyes. "I do know that." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "The bikers," she said finally, "they're really coming back? On Sunday?" "That's what he said." "And you believe him?" Harold considered the question. 24 hours ago, if someone had told him he'd trust a Hell's Angel with his life, he would have laughed. These were the men mothers warned their children about. The men who owned the night. The men everyone feared. But Brick had looked at Margaret with something Harold recognized. Respect. Protection. The same thing Harold felt every time he looked at his wife. "Yeah," Harold said slowly. "I believe him." Margaret closed her eye. "Good," she whispered, "because I think I believe him too." They lay there in silence, holding hands, watching the room grow lighter as the sun crept over the horizon. At 7:15, Harold finally dragged himself out of bed. His cane was leaning against the nightstand. Repaired, he remembered. That skinny kid, Scraps, had glued it back together while Harold wasn't looking. He grabbed it, tested his weight. Solid. "I'm going to make coffee," he told Margaret. "You stay in bed." "I'm not an invalid, Harold. You were beaten yesterday. Stay in bed." "Harold Mitchell, if you think—" "Please." The word stopped her. Harold didn't say please often. 43 years of marriage, and she could count on one hand the number of times he'd said that word with such raw desperation. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, I'll stay. Thank you." He kissed her forehead and limped out of the room. The stairs were murder. Every step sent lightning bolts up his spine. His bad leg dragged. His good leg compensated. By the time he reached the bottom, sweat was dripping down his forehead. But the house looked different. The new door stood solid in its frame. The walls were freshly painted. The coffee table, rebuilt better than before, sat in the center of the living room like nothing had ever happened. Harold stood there, leaning on his cane, taking it all in. 7 strangers had done this. 7 men covered in tattoos, in leather and chains. 7 Hell's Angels, who owed him nothing and gave him everything. His eyes burned. He blinked rapidly, clearing his throat. Coffee. He needed coffee. The kitchen was spotless. Tank had cleaned everything before leaving. Dishes washed, counters wiped, floor mopped. There was even a note on the refrigerator written in surprisingly neat handwriting. Leftover soup in the blue container, heat on medium, don't let it boil. Tank. Harold laughed. A 280-pound biker with skull tattoos, leaving cooking instructions like someone's grandmother. The world had gone insane. He started the coffee maker, then leaned against the counter, waiting for the familiar gurgle and hiss. 7:43 a.m. The knock came at 7:52. Harold's whole body went rigid. His hand tightened on his cane. His heart slammed against his ribs. For one terrible second, he was back in yesterday. 2 strangers at the door, demanding money, pushing him to the floor. "Mr. Mitchell?" A young voice, nervous, familiar. Harold limped to the door, peered through the peephole. Derek stood on the porch, snake tattoo on his neck, face bruised from yesterday's encounter with Brick, eyes red and swollen like he'd been crying all night. Behind him, Kyle, red cap clutched in his hands, shifting from foot to foot. 8 a.m., Brick had said. They were early. Harold's jaw tightened. He opened the door. Derek flinched, actually flinched, like he expected Harold to hit him. "Mr.
Mitchell,
The kid's voice cracked. "We're here, like we promised. We brought tools and supplies and—" "I know why you're here." Derek swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." Harold studied them. 24 hours ago, these two had beaten his wife, had shoved him to the floor, had taken their money and run like the cowards they were. Now they stood on his porch, trembling, waiting for judgment. Part of Harold wanted to slam the door in their faces. Part of him wanted to take his cane and beat them the way they'd beaten Margaret. But another part, a quieter part, remembered something Margaret had said yesterday. Prison won't teach them anything except how to be better criminals. She was right. She was always right. "Tools in the garage," Harold said flatly. "There's a fence in the backyard that needs fixing. Posts are rotting. You'll need to dig them out and replace them." Derek blinked. "Yes, sir. We'll get started right away." "And Kyle?" Kyle jumped. "Yes, sir. My wife takes her coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream. You're going to bring her a cup every morning you're here. Understood?" "Yes, sir. And if I ever see you raise your hand to anyone again, Brick won't have to deal with you." "I will." Harold's voice was quiet, calm. Somehow that made it more terrifying. Derek and Kyle nodded frantically. "Get to work." They scrambled off the porch like their lives depended on it. Harold watched them go. His hands were shaking. Adrenaline probably, or rage, or something else entirely. That was impressive. He spun around. Margaret stood at the bottom of the stairs, blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching him with her one good eye. "I told you to stay in bed." "I told you I'm not an invalid." She walked slowly toward him. "Did you just threaten those boys?" "Maybe." Harold Mitchell, threatening people, at your age. They deserved it. Margaret reached him, took his free hand. "Yes," she said softly. "They did." They stood there together, watching through the window as Derek and Kyle hauled tools from the garage. "Do you think they'll actually change?" Margaret asked. "I don't know. But you're giving them a chance. You're the one who asked for it. I'm just following orders." Margaret laughed, then winced, touching her bruised face. "Don't make me laugh. It hurts." "Sorry." "No, you're not." "No," Harold admitted. "I'm not." The morning passed slowly. Harold sat on the back porch watching Derek and Kyle work on the fence. They moved awkwardly at first, clearly not used to manual labor. Derek hit his thumb with a hammer twice. Kyle dropped a post on his foot and spent 5 minutes hopping around, cursing under his breath. But they didn't complain. They didn't ask for breaks. They just worked. By noon, 3 fence posts had been replaced. Not perfect work. Harold could see the uneven spacing from where he sat. But honest work. Maybe that counted for something. "Mr. Mitchell?" Harold looked up. Kyle stood at the bottom of the porch steps, cap in his hands, face streaked with dirt and sweat. "What?" I made Mrs. Mitchell's coffee. Like you said, 2 sugars, splash of cream. I left it on the kitchen counter." "Fine." Kyle didn't move. "Something else?" The kid shifted uncomfortably. Can I ask you something?" Harold's eyes narrowed. "Depends on what it is." "Yesterday, when those bikers showed up, why didn't you just let them kill us?" The question hung in the air. Harold was quiet for a long moment. "Because my wife asked me not to." "That's it?" "That's it." Kyle stared at him. "But we hurt her. We hurt both of you. Why would she?" "Because she's a better person than either of us." Harold's voice was hard. "Because she believes people can change. Because she spent 70 years watching the world disappoint her, and she still thinks there's good in everyone." He leaned forward. "Don't make her wrong. Don't prove her wrong. Because if you do, if you go back to hurting people, then I won't stop Brick next time. I'll help him." Kyle's face went pale. "Yes, sir, I understand." "Good, now get back to work." The kid practically ran back to the fence. At 2:30, a car pulled up in front of the house. Harold heard the engine, the slam of doors, the rapid footsteps on the walkway. Then the front door burst open. "Dad? Mom? Where are you?" Harold sighed. The cavalry had arrived. Tommy Mitchell, Harold and Margaret's youngest son, 52 years old, receding hairline, permanent worry lines, stormed into the living room. "Dad!" He spotted Harold in the armchair. "What the hell happened?" "Mrs. Patterson called and said..." "Mrs. Patterson needs to mind her own business. She said bikers showed up. Hell's Angels. She said there was screaming and..." "Tommy," Harold raised a hand. "Calm down." "Calm down? Mom was attacked. You were attacked. And now Mrs. Patterson says there are criminals in your backyard." "Those aren't criminals. Those are the men who attacked us." Tommy's mouth fell open. "What?" "They're doing community service, fixing our fence." "Community service? Dad, that's not how this works. You call the police. You press charges. You don't put them to work in your backyard." Harold looked at his son. Tommy had always been the nervous one, the worrier. Even as a child, he'd stayed up late, convinced monsters lived under his bed. He'd checked locks 3 times before sleeping. He'd called his parents every day during college just to make sure they were okay. It was exhausting. It was also, Harold realized, love. "Sit down, Tommy." "Dad, sit down." Tommy sat. Harold told him everything. The break-in, the beating, the Hell's Angels showing up, Brick chasing down the attackers, the repairs, the soup, everything. By the end, Tommy was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. "Let me get this straight," Tommy said slowly. "A gang of bikers saved you? They're not a gang, they're a club. Dad, the Hell's Angels are literally..." "I know what they are. I also know what they did. They helped us when no one else would. Not Mrs. Patterson, not the Hendersons, not anyone on this street." Harold's voice hardened. "Where were you, Tommy?" Tommy flinched. "What?" "Your mother was beaten yesterday. Where were you?" "I was at work. I didn't know." "Exactly. You didn't know. Because none of your fancy security cameras or neighborhood watch programs or community apps told you anything. A stranger saved your mother. A stranger with tattoos and a motorcycle and a criminal record. Think about that." Tommy opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I want to meet them," he said finally. Harold blinked. "What?" "These bikers, I want to meet them. If they're going to be involved with my parents, I want to know who they are." They're coming on Sunday. Then I'll be here on Sunday. Harold studied his son's face. The worry was still there, the fear, the desperate need to protect. But underneath it, something else. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. Fine, Harold said. But Tommy? Yeah? Be polite. Brick could snap you in half. Tommy swallowed. Noted. Margaret came downstairs 20 minutes later. When Tommy saw her face, the bruises, the swollen eye, the cut lip, he burst into tears. Mom! He crossed the room in 3 steps, pulling her into a gentle hug. Oh God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have. Hush, Margaret patted his back. I'm fine, sweetheart. I look worse than I feel. You look terrible. Thomas Mitchell, that's no way to talk to your mother. Despite himself, Tommy laughed, a wet, choke sound. There's my boy. Margaret pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. I'm okay, really. Your father took care of everything. Dad in a motorcycle gang club, Harold corrected from his chair. Whatever, Margaret smiled, then winced. Stop making me smile, she told Tommy. It hurts. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Just help me to the couch. I want to watch those 2 boys fix our fence. Tommy helped her across the room, settling her onto the couch with 3 pillows and a blanket. This is insane, he muttered. My parents are being protected by the Hells Angels and putting their attackers to work in the backyard. This is absolutely insane. Life is insane, sweetheart. Margaret reached for his hand. The trick is finding the people who are insane in your favor. Tommy stared at her. When did you become a philosopher? 70 years of practice. The afternoon bled into evening. Tommy stayed for dinner, leftover soup from tank, heated according to his instructions. Derek and Kyle finished 5 fence posts before Harold sent them home with orders to return at 8 a.m. tomorrow. They left without complaint. This is weird, Tommy said, watching them walk down the street. This is so weird. You've said that 14 times, Margaret noted. Because it's true 14 times. Harold ignored them both. His eyes were on the street, watching, waiting. Brick had said Sunday. Today was Friday. 2 more days. Tommy left at 9 p.m. after making Harold promise to call if anything happened. Anything at all, even if a bird looked at them funny. Birds can't look funny, Harold said. Dad, promise me. Fine, I promise. And keep your phone charged. It's always charged. And lock all the doors. Tommy. And maybe consider getting a security system. Tommy. Okay. Tommy hugged his father, gently, carefully. I love you, Dad. Love you too, son. Take care of Mom. Always. Tommy left. The house fell quiet. Harold locked the new front door 3 times just to be sure, then helped Margaret up the stairs. Tommy's scared, Margaret said as they reached the bedroom. Tommy's always scared. He gets it from you. Harold stopped. What? Margaret smiled. You hide it better. But I've seen it, Harold. Every time something goes wrong, every time you can't fix something, that fear in your eyes. I'm not afraid. You were yesterday, when you saw me on the floor. Harold's throat tightened. That wasn't fear, he said quietly. That was rage. Same thing, sometimes. Margaret sat on the bed. Fear for someone you love turns into rage against anyone who threatens them. That's what I saw in those bikers' eyes. Rage. But underneath it, fear. Fear of losing something they care about. What do they have to lose? Each other. Margaret looked at him. Didn't you see it? The way they moved together, protected each other. They're a family, Harold. A strange, tattooed, leather-wearing family. Harold considered this. He thought about Brick's story, the mother he couldn't protect, the father he finally stopped, the promise at a graveside. Maybe you're right, he admitted. I'm always right. You've mentioned that, Margaret laughed, then winced, then laughed again. Ow, stop it. I didn't say anything. Your face said it. Your face always makes me laugh. Harold shook his head. 43 years. He'd never understand this woman, and he'd never stop trying. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Derek and Kyle showed up at 7:45, 15 minutes early. Their faces were tired but determined. "Mr. Mitchell," Derek's voice was hoarse, "we're ready to work." Harold noticed something different about the kid. The arrogance was gone. The swagger had evaporated. In its place was something that looked almost like shame. Good, Harold thought. Shame is the first step. "Fence," he said simply. "Finish it today." "Yes, sir." They worked. Harold watched from the porch, coffee in hand, cane across his lap. Every half hour, Kyle brought Margaret a fresh cup. 2 sugars, splash of cream, just like she liked it. By noon, the fence was done. All 12 posts replaced. New boards, fresh paint. It looked better than it had in years. Derek approached the porch, wiping sweat from his forehead. "We finished, Mr. Mitchell." Harold set down his coffee, pushed himself up, limped down the steps to inspect the work. He walked the length of the fence, tested each post, checked the alignment. Perfect. "Not bad," he admitted. Derek's face lit up. "Really? Don't get excited. You've got 6 months of work ahead of you." "Yes, sir, I know." Derek hesitated. "Mr. Mitchell?" "What?" "I wanted to say, I'm sorry, really sorry. What we did to you and Mrs. Mitchell, there's no excuse, I know that. He trailed off, staring at the ground. "You just what?" "I wish I could take it back. If I could go back in time and stop myself from ever knocking on your door." Derek's voice cracked. "I would. I swear I would." Harold studied the young man's face. He saw the snake tattoo, the remnants of bruises from Brick's fists, the red eyes from sleepless nights. But he also saw something else. Regret. Real regret. "You can't take it back," Harold said finally. "What's done is done. My wife will carry those bruises for weeks. She'll carry the fear for years, maybe forever." Derek flinched. "But," Harold paused, "you can be different. From now on, you can make choices that don't end with old women bleeding on their living room floors." "I want to. I really want to." "Then prove it. Not to me, not to my wife, to yourself." Derek nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "Now go home, get some sleep. I'll see you Monday." Derek turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Mitchell?" "What now?" "Those bikers, the Hells Angels, they could have killed us. Brick could have beaten us to death and nobody would have stopped him." Derek's voice was barely a whisper. "Why didn't he?" Harold thought about the question. "Because death is easy," he said finally. "Living with what you've done is hard. Brick wanted you to live." Derek stared at him. Then slowly he nodded. "I think I understand." "Good. Now get out of my yard." Derek left. Kyle followed, head down, cap clutched in his hands. Harold watched them walk down the street until they disappeared around the corner. "You're getting soft in your old age." He turned. Margaret stood in the back doorway, blanket around her shoulders, a smile playing at her lips. "I'm not soft." "You just gave that boy a life lesson. That's soft." "That's common sense. Can't have criminals fixing our fence if they're dead." Margaret laughed. Didn't wince this time. "The swelling's going down," she said, touching her face. "I can almost open my eye." "Good. Come inside, I'll make you lunch." "You should be resting." "Harold Mitchell, if you tell me to rest one more time, I will beat you myself." Harold raised his hands in surrender. "Yes, ma'am." The phone rang at 4:17 p.m. Harold answered on the third ring. "Hello?" "Mr. Mitchell." Brick's voice, deep, unmistakable. "How are things?" Harold blinked. "How did you get this number?" "Phone book. You're listed." "Nobody uses phone books anymore." "I'm old-fashioned." A pause. "Your wife, how is she?" Harold glanced at Margaret, dozing on the couch with the TV on low. "Better. Swelling's going down. She's almost back to her usual self. Good. And those two punks? They show up like they promised? Both days. Finish the fence this afternoon. Good work? Good enough. Brick was quiet for a moment. We're still coming tomorrow, me and a few of the boys. That okay with you? Harold felt something warm spread through his chest. Yeah, he said, that's okay. We'll bring food. Tank wants to make pot roast. Says your kitchen's got good equipment. Harold laughed. Tell Tank he's welcome to it. Will do. Another pause. Mr. Mitchell? Yeah? You did good. Giving those kids a chance. Most people wouldn't. Most people didn't get their wife beaten. Exactly. Most people would want blood. You chose different. Harold didn't know what to say. See you tomorrow, Mr. Mitchell. See you tomorrow, Brick. The line went dead. Harold stood there for a moment, phone in hand, staring at nothing. Who was that? Margaret's voice, sleepy. Brick, they're coming tomorrow, bringing pot roast. Margaret opened her good eye. The Hells Angels are bringing us pot roast. Apparently Tank wants to cook. This is the strangest week of my life. Mine too, Margaret smiled. I kinda love it. Harold sat down beside her, taking her hand in his. Me too, he admitted. Me too. Sunday arrived. Harold woke early again, 5:32 this time. His back wasn't as bad, his legs still ached, but less than before. He lay there in the gray light, listening to Margaret breathe. Today, the bikers were coming back. Today, his son was coming to meet them. Today, everything could go wrong. Or everything could go right. Harold didn't know which was scarier. He got up at 6, made coffee, and sat on the back porch watching the sun rise over his newly repaired fence. At 8 a.m., Tommy arrived. You're early, Harold said. I couldn't sleep. Tommy looked exhausted. When are they getting here? Brick didn't say. Great, so we just wait? We just wait. Margaret came down at 9. She looked better. The swelling had reduced significantly, and she could open both eyes now. The bruises were still dark, but fading. Tommy, she hugged her son. You didn't have to come. Yes, I did. Your father's being dramatic about the whole thing. Mom, you were attacked. And now I'm fine. Stop worrying. Tommy looked at Harold helplessly. Harold shrugged. She's been like this for 43 years. You get used to it. At 11:47, the rumble started. Distant at first, then closer, louder. Tommy went pale. Oh God, they're here. Harold stood up, grabbing his cane. Stay calm. Stay calm? There's a motorcycle gang pulling up to my parents' house. Club, Harold and Margaret said simultaneously. Tommy stared at them. You've both lost your minds. The motorcycles stopped outside. Harold counted them through the window. 7 bikes, same as before. Brick dismounted first, then Razor, Tank, Demon, Scraps, Joker, and one new face, a woman. Tall, lean, dark hair streaked with gray, tattoos covering both arms. Harold opened the door before they could knock. Brick stood on the porch, a grocery bag in each hand. Mr. Mitchell, he nodded. Permission to enter? Granted. The crew filed in. Tommy pressed himself against the wall, eyes wide, as 7 leather-clad figures passed him. Tank made a beeline for the kitchen. Mrs. Mitchell, you look better. I'm making pot roast, hope that's okay. That's wonderful, dear. Demon waved awkwardly. Hey, Mr. Mitchell, looking good. Thanks, I think. Scraps was carrying a bouquet of flowers. Roses. Red ones. These are for Mrs. Mitchell, he mumbled, face red. Thought she might like them. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Oh, sweetheart. She took the flowers gently. They're beautiful. The woman Harold didn't recognize stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Viper, Brick's wife. Harold blinked. Wife? Brick put his arm around her. 23 years this June. I didn't know you were married. You didn't ask. Brick's eyes flickered to Tommy. Who's this? Tommy straightened, tried to look confident, failed. Thomas Mitchell, their son. Brick studied him for a long moment. Tommy didn't flinch, barely. Good grip, Brick said finally, releasing his hand. Your parents raised you right. Thanks, I think. Margaret appeared at Harold's side. Well, she said brightly, now that everyone's here, how about some coffee? The afternoon was unlike anything Harold had ever experienced. Tank took over the kitchen completely, banishing everyone except Scraps, who became his assistant. The smell of roasting meat filled the house. Viper sat with Margaret on the couch, examining her bruises with surprisingly gentle fingers. These are healing well, Viper said. You're tough. I've had practice. Being married to a man? Margaret laughed. Being alive for 70 years. Viper smiled. I like you. I like you too, dear. Tommy stood in the corner, watching everything with barely concealed shock. Brick appeared beside him. Your parents are good people, Brick said quietly. Tommy jumped. Jesus, don't sneak up on me like that. Sorry, old habit. Brick leaned against the wall. You got questions, I can see it in your face. Ask. Tommy hesitated. Why? He finally said. Why help them? You don't know them. You were just riding through. Brick was quiet for a moment. You ever feel like the world's broken, Mr. Mitchell? Like people don't care about each other anymore? Like everyone's just surviving, going through the motions, pretending none of it matters. Tommy didn't answer. I feel it every day, Brick continued. That emptiness, that disconnect. And I spent years making it worse, hurting people, taking what I wanted, being exactly what everyone expected me to be. He turned to look at Tommy. Then I met Viper. She showed me something different. Showed me that caring about people, protecting them, helping them, that's not weakness, that's strength. So you just help strangers now? When I can. When the universe puts them in my path. Brick nodded toward Harold. Your father stood in the middle of that street and screamed for help. Not for himself, for his wife. That took guts, more guts than most men have. Tommy was silent. He reminds me of who I wish I'd been, Brick said softly. Before all this, before the tattoos and the bikes and the reputation. A man who loves his wife enough to fight for her, even when his body won't cooperate. Tommy looked at his father, really looked at him. The cane, the limp, the way he moved like every step was a battle. And the way he looked at Margaret, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. He's always been like that, Tommy said quietly. Since I was a kid, Mom was his whole world. Then you understand, Tommy nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I do. Dinner was served at 5 p.m. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, a salad that Viper insisted on making because you boys would all die of scurvy without vegetables. They sat around the Mitchells' small dining table, all 10 of them squeezed together, elbows bumping, plates balanced on laps. It should have been awkward. It wasn't. Stories flowed. Laughter echoed. Demon told a joke about a priest and a rabbi that made Margaret nearly choke on her bread. Joker performed card tricks that had Tommy clapping like a child. And at the head of the table, Harold Mitchell sat with his wife's hand in his, watching these strangers, these friends, fill their home with noise and warmth. You're crying, Margaret whispered. No, I'm not. Harold, it's the onions. There are no onions in pot roast. Harold wiped his eyes quickly. Shut up. Margaret kissed his cheek. I love you too. At 8 p.m., the crew started gathering their things. Brick was the last to leave. He stood in the doorway, looking back at Harold and Margaret. Same time next week? Harold nodded. Same time. We'll bring dessert. Tank makes a hell of a cheesecake. I'll clear room in the fridge. Brick smiled. Then, unexpectedly, he pulled Harold into a hug. It was brief, firm. The kind of hug men give when words aren't enough. Thank you, Brick said quietly. For what? For not being afraid of us. for giving us a chance to be something other than what people expect. Harold's throat tightened. Thank you, he managed, for everything. Brick released him, nodded once. Then he was gone, the roar of his motorcycle fading into the night. Tommy stood on the porch, watching. Dad? Yeah, I think I understand now why you trust them. Harold put his arm around his son. It's not about trust, he said. It's about seeing people for who they really are, not who the world says they should be. Tommy was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to visit more often, he said finally. Not because I'm worried, because I want to. Harold smiled. We'd like that, son. They stood there together, father and son, watching the empty street. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine echoed. And on Maple Avenue, for the first time in years, everything felt exactly right. 3 weeks changed everything on Maple Avenue. The neighbors who had hidden behind their curtains now waved when Harold walked to the mailbox. Mrs. Patterson brought casseroles every Tuesday. Guilt offerings, Margaret called them. The Hendersons from across the street actually crossed the street to say hello instead of avoiding eye contact. And every Sunday, without fail, the rumble of motorcycles announced the arrival of the Hells Angels. Harold had stopped flinching at the sound. Now it felt like coming home. You're smiling again, Margaret said one morning, watching him from the kitchen doorway. You've been doing that a lot lately. Have I? Don't pretend you haven't noticed. You're practically a different person. Harold set down his coffee cup. Maybe I am. Margaret crossed the room and kissed his forehead. Her bruises had faded completely now, just faint yellow shadows where the purple had been. I like this version of you, she said softly. The one who believes in people again. Don't get used to it. I'm still a grumpy old man. You're my grumpy old man. There's a difference. The phone rang at 9:17 a.m. Harold answered it without checking the caller ID. Mistake. Mr. Mitchell? A voice he didn't recognize. Female, professional, cold. Who's asking? This is Detective Sarah Chen, Austin Police Department. I need to speak with you about an incident that occurred at your residence approximately 3 weeks ago. Harold's grip tightened on the phone. What incident? We received a report of assault and home invasion. Your name came up in connection with a group known as the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. Harold's blood went cold. Who filed this report? I'm not at liberty to say, but I need you to come down to the station for questioning. Today, if possible. Am I being charged with something? Not at this time, but your cooperation would be appreciated. Harold looked at Margaret. She was watching him with concern, hands frozen mid-motion over the dishes. I'll be there in an hour, Harold said. He hung up. Harold? Margaret's voice was tight. What's wrong? Police. They want to ask questions about what happened. But that was 3 weeks ago. Why now? Harold didn't answer, because he didn't know. But he had a feeling, a very bad feeling. The police station smelled like old coffee and desperation. Harold sat in a plastic chair, his cane across his lap, waiting. He'd been waiting for 45 minutes. His back screamed. His leg throbbed. He didn't move. Finally, a door opened. Mr. Mitchell? Detective Chen was younger than he'd expected. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, no smile. This way, please. He followed her down a hallway into a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. Interrogation room. Harold had seen enough cop shows to recognize one. Please, sit. Chen gestured to the far chair. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I'd like to know why I'm here. Chen sat across from him, folding her hands on the table. Mr. Mitchell, 3 weeks ago, your home was invaded by 2 individuals, Derek Lawson and Kyle Peters. Is that correct? Yes. And during this invasion, your wife Margaret was assaulted? Yes. Yet no police report was filed. Harold's jaw tightened. We handled it ourselves. By handled it, you mean you enlisted the help of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club to track down and assault the perpetrators? I didn't enlist anyone. They were riding past. They heard me calling for help. They helped. And then they beat Derek Lawson and Kyle Peters? Harold hesitated. Mr. Mitchell, I have hospital records. Derek Lawson had a broken nose, 2 cracked ribs, and a fractured eye socket. Kyle Peters had a dislocated shoulder and multiple contusions. Both claim they were attacked by members of the Hells Angels acting on your behalf. They broke into my home. They beat my 70-year-old wife. Whatever happened to them, they brought on themselves. Chen leaned back in her chair. Mr. Mitchell, I understand your anger. I do. But we can't have vigilante justice in this city. We can't have motorcycle gangs, clubs. Excuse me? They're called clubs, not gangs. Chen's expression didn't change. Regardless of terminology, Mr. Mitchell, the law is clear. Assault is assault, regardless of the circumstances that preceded it. Harold leaned forward. Detective Chen, let me ask you something. Where were the police when those 2 men kicked down my door? Where were they when my wife was bleeding on the floor? I called 911. Did you know that? I called and they told me the wait time was 45 minutes. 45 minutes. Chen didn't respond. By the time any officer would have arrived, those men would have been gone. My wife could have been dead. I could have been dead. The only reason we're alive is because 7 strangers on motorcycles decided we were worth saving. Mr. Mitchell, so forgive me if I don't feel particularly cooperative with a system that failed us completely when we needed it most. Silence. Chen stared at him for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she sighed. Off the record, Mr. Mitchell? Harold nodded slowly. I get it. I really do. The system is broken. Response times are a joke. People fall through the cracks every single day. She rubbed her temples. But I have a job to do, and when 2 men show up at a hospital claiming they were beaten by the Hells Angels, I have to investigate. Who told you about us? Derek and Kyle signed agreements. They're doing community service at our house. They've been nothing but cooperative. Chen hesitated. It wasn't them. Then who? A concerned citizen. Anonymous tip. Harold's stomach dropped. Someone on Maple Avenue. I can't confirm or deny. It was one of my neighbors, wasn't it? Someone who watched my wife get beaten and did nothing is now trying to get the people who helped us thrown in jail. Chen didn't answer. She didn't have to. Harold stood up, grabbing his cane. Are we done here? Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to need you to... Am I under arrest? No, but... Then we're done. He walked out without looking back. The ride home was a blur. Harold's hands shook on the steering wheel. Rage pulsed through his veins, hot and thick and suffocating. Someone had betrayed them. Someone who had hidden behind their curtains while Margaret screamed. Someone who had refused to help when Harold begged in the middle of the street. Someone who had watched the Hells Angels repair their home, share their meals, become their family, and then called the police. Harold knew exactly who it was. He pulled into his driveway at 12:47 p.m. Margaret was waiting on the porch, worry etched across her face. Harold, what happened? Are you okay? I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like you're about to kill someone. I might be. He limped past her, into the house, straight to the phone. Harold, what are you doing? He dialed. 3 rings. Hello? Brick, it's Harold. We have a problem. 20 minutes later, the motorcycles arrived. Not 7 this time, just 2. Brick and Viper. They sat in the living room while Harold explained everything. The police station, the detective, the anonymous tip. Brick's face remained stone throughout. You're sure it was a neighbor? Viper asked. Who else would it be? Derek and Kyle wouldn't risk it. They know what would happen. It had to be someone watching from the street, someone who saw everything. Brick stood up, walked to the window, stared out at Maple Avenue. There's something you need to know, he said quietly. I wasn't going to tell you because I didn't want to worry you. But now, Harold's heart clenched. What? We've been getting threats, anonymous letters, phone calls in the middle of the night. Someone's been spreading rumors about the club, that we're running drugs to the neighborhood, that we're using your house as a front. That's insane. Of course it is, but people believe what they want to believe. And someone on this street wants us gone. Margaret's hand found Harold's. Why? She whispered. Why would anyone do this? Brick turned to face them. Fear. People are afraid of what they don't understand. We roll into this nice suburban neighborhood, start visiting an elderly couple every weekend, and suddenly everyone's imagining the worst. But you've done nothing wrong. We're hell's angels, Mrs. Mitchell. To most people, that's wrong enough. Harold's mind was racing. The police said they weren't pressing charges. Not yet. But if this person keeps pushing, keeps making reports, they can make our lives very difficult. Brick's jaw tightened. They can dig into our pasts, find things we'd rather stay buried, use them against us. Viper stood up, moving to her husband's side. We've been through worse, she said firmly. We'll get through this too. Maybe, Brick looked at Harold, but I won't let this blow back on you. If we need to stop coming around, no. The word came from Margaret. She was on her feet, her eyes blazing. No, she repeated. You're not going anywhere. You're family now. You don't abandon family because some coward is making phone calls. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm 70 years old, Brick. I've lived through more than you can imagine. I've lost friends, buried parents, watched my husband nearly die in that accident. And through all of it, do you know what I've learned? Brick shook his head. You hold on to the people who matter. You fight for them. You don't let small-minded people take them away from you. She walked up to Brick and took his massive hands in her small, wrinkled ones. You saved my life. You saved my husband's life. And more than that, you reminded us that good people still exist. I am not losing you to some anonymous coward. Brick stared down at her. For a moment, Harold saw something crack in that tough exterior. Something vulnerable, something human. You're something else, Mrs. Mitchell, Brick said quietly. Call me Margaret, and we're finding out who did this. Harold spent the next 3 days watching. He sat on his porch from sunrise to sunset, noting every car that passed, every neighbor who walked by, every curtain that twitched. By Wednesday, he had his suspect, Mrs. Patterson, the woman who brought guilt casseroles every Tuesday, the woman who had hidden while Margaret screamed, the woman who smiled too widely and asked too many questions about those motorcycle friends of yours. Harold watched her take out her trash on Wednesday evening. She glanced at his house, quickly, nervously, then hurried back inside. Got you, he called Brick. I know who it is. You sure? Positive, but I don't want to handle this with fists. I want to handle it right. Brick was quiet for a moment. What did you have in mind? Harold smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. A conversation. Thursday morning, Harold knocked on Mrs. Patterson's door. She opened it with that same too-wide smile. Harold, what a pleasant surprise. Would you like to come in? I just made lemonade. I know it was you. The smile froze. Excuse me? The anonymous tip, the police investigation, the rumors about drugs and criminal activity. Harold's voice was calm, steady, terrifying in its stillness. I know it was you, Linda. Mrs. Patterson's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock, fear, indignation. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. I've been watching. I've seen you peeking through your curtains every time the motorcycles arrive. I've heard you gossiping with the Hendersons about that dangerous gang. And I remember very clearly that you were home when my wife was being beaten. I saw your face in the window. Mrs. Patterson's composure cracked. They're criminals, Harold. Dangerous criminals. I was trying to protect the neighborhood by calling the police on the people who saved my wife's life. They broke the law. They assaulted those two young men. Those two young men broke into my home and beat a 70-year-old woman for $47. Harold's voice rose for the first time. Where was your concern for the law then, Linda? Where were your anonymous tips? Mrs. Patterson shrank back. I was scared. We were all scared. You were cowards, every single one of you. You watched through your windows and you did nothing. And now that people are actually helping us, you want to destroy that too? Harold, please. Let me tell you something, Linda. Harold stepped closer. Those dangerous criminals have been better neighbors to us in 3 weeks than you've been in 20 years. They fixed our door. They cooked our meals. They sit with us every Sunday and treat us like family. He leaned in. What have you ever done, Linda, besides bring casseroles to ease your own guilt? Mrs. Patterson's eyes filled with tears. I was trying to help. No, you were trying to feel important. You were trying to be the hero of a story where you're actually the villain. He turned to walk away, then stopped. If you call the police again, if you spread one more rumor about the Hells Angels, I will tell everyone on this street exactly what you did, how you watched my wife bleed and did nothing, how you're trying to destroy the people who actually stepped up. Mrs. Patterson was crying now. I'm sorry, Harold. I'm so sorry. Tell that to Margaret. He walked away. That evening, Brick called. Heard you paid Linda a visit. Word travels fast. Demon was doing a drive-by, making sure your house was secure. Saw you on her porch. A pause. You didn't hit her, did you? I didn't need to. Words were enough. Brick chuckled. You're tougher than you look, old man. I learned from the best. Flattery will get you everywhere. Another pause. The detective called me today. Harold's heart stuttered. And? She's closing the investigation. Not enough evidence to proceed. Derek and Kyle refused to cooperate, said they fell down some stairs. Harold laughed. Actually laughed. Fell down some stairs? Classic excuse, works every time. So it's over? For now, but Harold, this won't be the last time. People like Linda, they don't give up easy. We need to be ready. For what? Whatever comes next. The next Sunday was different. The crew arrived as usual, 7 bikes, rumbling down Maple Avenue. But this time, they weren't the only ones watching. Neighbors came out of their houses. Not all of them, not even most of them, but a few. The Hendersons, the Nguyen's from 3 doors down, old Mr. Wallace who hadn't left his house in months. They stood on their porches, watching, waiting. Brick noticed immediately. We got an audience, he murmured to Harold. I see that. You want us to leave? Harold looked at the neighbors, at their faces, curious, uncertain, maybe a little afraid. Then he looked at his wife, standing beside him with her chin lifted high. No, Harold said. I want you to stay, and I want them to see exactly who you are. He raised his voice. Hey, you all want to meet my friends? Come on over. Tank's making ribs. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mr. Wallace, 93 years old, Korean War veteran, crankiest man on Maple Avenue, started walking toward Harold's house. I like ribs, he announced to no one in particular. The spell broke. One by one, the neighbors approached, hesitant, nervous, but approaching. Mrs. Nguyen brought a fruit salad. Mr. Henderson carried a folding chair. Even Mrs. Patterson crept out of her house, eyes red, a pie trembling in her hands. She stopped at the edge of Harold's lawn. May I come in? Harold looked at Margaret. Margaret studied the woman for a long moment. Then she nodded. Wipe your feet. The backyard was chaos. 23 people, 7 bikers, 1 grill. Tank was in his element, flipping ribs and barking orders like a tattooed drill sergeant. You, Henderson, don't just stand there. Get me the barbecue sauce. Yes, sir. Demon was teaching the Nguyen kids card tricks. Badly. The cards kept falling out of his hands. That's not how you do it, 8-year-old Sophie Nguyen announced. You're supposed to hide the card under your thumb. How do you know that? YouTube. Kids these days, Demon muttered. Joker had somehow acquired a guitar and was playing country songs while Scraps sang along. Scraps had a terrible voice. Nobody cared. And in the middle of it all, Harold Mitchell sat in his favorite chair, his wife's hand in his, watching the impossible unfold. You're smiling again, Margaret said. I know. You're not even trying to hide it anymore. Why would I? She leaned her head against his shoulder. This is what I always wanted for us, she said softly. Community, connection, people who actually care about each other. We have it now. Because of them. She nodded toward Brick, who was showing Mr. Wallace his motorcycle. Because they took a chance on us. We took a chance on them too. Best decision we ever made. Harold kissed the top of her head. Second best. Best decision was marrying you. Charmer. Always. At 7 p.m., Brick stood up and clinked his beer bottle with a fork. The yard fell silent. I'm not much for speeches, Brick said. Most of you know that, but today feels important. He looked around at the faces watching him. Bikers, neighbors, old and young, tattooed and clean-cut. 3 weeks ago, I stopped my bike in the middle of the street because an old man was screaming for help. I didn't think. I just stopped. And in that moment, something changed. He paused. I've spent most of my life being what people expected me to be. Dangerous, violent, someone to fear. And yeah, I've done things I'm not proud of. We all have. Viper reached up and took his hand. But then I met Harold and Margaret Mitchell. Two people who looked at us, really looked at us, and didn't see criminals. They saw human beings. They invited us into their home. They treated us like family. His voice roughened. That changed me. It changed all of us. Because when someone sees the best in you, it makes you want to be that person. It makes you want to deserve their faith. He raised his beer. To the Mitchells, for reminding us that it's never too late to be who you want to be. To the Mitchells, the yard chorused. Harold's eyes were burning. He didn't care who saw. Margaret was openly crying. Speech, someone shouted. Harold, speech. Harold tried to wave them off, but hands were pushing him upright, steadying him as he stood. He cleared his throat. I'm not good at this, he admitted. Ask Margaret. I've never been good at words. It's true, Margaret called. He proposed with a note because he was too nervous to speak. Laughter rippled through the crowd. But I want to say something. Harold's voice steadied. A month ago, I gave up. I gave up on people, on community, on the idea that strangers could be kind. He looked at Brick. Then 7 men on motorcycles proved me wrong. They didn't have to stop. They didn't have to help. But they did. Because that's who they are. Not criminals, not thugs, just people. Good people, trying to make the world a little less broken. He raised his cane, his repaired cane glued back together by a skinny kid named Scraps. To the Hells Angels, for showing this old man that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather. To the Hells Angels! The cheers were deafening. Brick crossed the yard and pulled Harold into a hug. Thank you, Brick murmured, for everything. Thank you, Harold replied, for giving us a reason to believe again. They held on for a moment longer, then released. The party continued. At 10 p.m., the last guest finally left. The Wynns, the Hendersons, even Mrs. Patterson, who had spent the entire evening apologizing to anyone who would listen. The bikers stayed to help clean up. Tank washed dishes. Demon collected trash. Razor folded chairs. It was oddly domestic, watching these massive tattooed men perform such mundane tasks. You ever think about moving? Brick asked Harold as they walked the yard, picking up stray napkins. Moving? Somewhere bigger, now that you've got, he gestured vaguely, all this. Harold considered the question. No, he said finally. This is home. Margaret's roses are here. Our memories are here. Why would we leave? Brick nodded slowly. Good answer. Why? You thinking of moving? Sometimes. Brick's voice was distant. The club's got property up north. Quieter, safer. Viper's been pushing for it. But I keep finding reasons to stay. He looked at Harold. People like you. People who make this city worth fighting for. Harold didn't know what to say. Don't get mushy on me, Brick added. I've got a reputation to maintain. Wouldn't dream of it. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence. At 11:30, the crew finally mounted their bikes. Same time next week? Brick asked. Wouldn't miss it. Bring your wallet. Tank wants to teach you poker. I'm terrible at poker. I know, that's why he wants to teach you. Harold laughed. The engines roared to life. 7 bikes, 7 riders, 7 friends. They pulled away from the curb one by one until only Brick remained. He raised a hand in farewell. Harold raised his cane in response. Then Brick was gone, the thunder of his engine fading into the night. Margaret appeared at Harold's side. You know what I realized today? She said softly. What? We're not alone anymore. For the first time in years, we're not alone. Harold put his arm around her. No, he agreed. We're not. They stood there for a long time, watching the empty street, listening to the silence. The night was cold, but Harold Mitchell had never felt warmer. 2 months felt like a lifetime. Harold stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Derek and Kyle work on the garden shed. They'd been at it since 7 a.m., sanding, painting, replacing rotted boards. Neither complained. Neither asked for breaks. They changed. Harold could see it in the way they moved, the way they spoke, the way they looked Margaret in the eye now, instead of at the ground. You're doing that thing again, Margaret said from behind him. What thing? That thing where you stare at those boys like a proud father. I'm not proud, I'm observing. Harold Mitchell, I've been married to you for 43 years. I know when you're proud. Harold took a sip of his coffee. Maybe a little. Margaret laughed and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his back. They're good boys. Underneath all that stupidity, they're good boys. They almost killed you. And now Derek brings me flowers every Friday. Life is complicated. Harold turned to face her. When did you become so forgiving? When I realized holding on to anger was only hurting me, she reached up and touched his face. Besides, I had a good teacher. Brick? You idiot. The phone rang at 9:47 a.m. Harold answered it. Hello? Mr. Mitchell, Derek's voice, shaking, terrified. Mr. Mitchell, I need to talk to you, right now, in person. You're in my backyard. I know. Can you come outside? Please, it's important. Harold set down the phone. What's wrong? Margaret asked. I don't know, but I'm about to find out. He grabbed his cane and walked out the back door. Derek was standing by the shed, face pale, hands trembling. Kyle stood a few feet away, equally shaken. What happened? Harold demanded. Derek couldn't meet his eyes. Mr. Mitchell, I did something. Before the break-in, something bad, and it's coming back. What are you talking about? The money we stole from you, it wasn't for us. We owed people, dangerous people. Harold's blood chilled. What kind of people? Loan sharks. We got in deep. Gambling, stupid decisions. We owed them $12,000. They gave us a deadline. That's why we... Derek's voice cracked. That's why we broke in. We were desperate. You told me you paid them back. I lied. Derek finally looked up, tears streaming down his face. I used the money for rent, for food. I thought maybe they'd forget. Maybe they'd move on to someone else. But they didn't. They found me yesterday. They said I have 1 week to pay the full amount, plus interest, $15,000 total. Harold's grip tightened on his cane. And if you don't? Derek's face crumpled. They said they'd take it out of everyone I care about, starting with a nice old couple on Maple Avenue. The words hit Harold like a physical blow. They know about us? They've been watching me. They know I come here every day. They know where you live. Derek was sobbing now. I'm so sorry, Mr. Mitchell. I never meant for this to happen. I never... Stop. Harold held up a hand. Just stop. His mind was racing. $15,000. 1 week. Loan sharks who knew his address. This was bad. This was very, very bad. Have you told anyone else? Just Kyle. I was afraid to tell the bikers. I thought they'd what? Kill me. Harold looked at the boy, because that's what he was, really. Just a boy who'd made terrible decisions and felt something unexpected. Not anger, pity. Come inside, Harold said. Both of you, we need to make a call. Brick arrived within the hour. He listened to Derek's story without interrupting. His face remained stone throughout. When Derek finished, Brick stood up slowly. Derek flinched. Please, the boy whispered. Please don't hurt me. I'll do anything. Shut up. Derek shut up. Brick walked to the window, stared out at the street. You know who these loan sharks are? They call themselves the Collectors, run by a guy named Marcus Webb. Something shifted in Brick's posture. Webb, he said quietly. Marcus Webb. You know him? Harold asked. We have history. Brick turned around. His eyes were dark, dangerous. Bad history. What kind of history? The kind that put 3 of my brothers in the hospital 6 years ago. Brick's hands curled into fists. Webb runs the South Side. Drugs, gambling, loans. We had a disagreement over territory. What happened? We won, barely. Webb swore he'd get revenge someday. Looks like he found his opening. Harold felt the floor shift beneath him. This wasn't just about Derek anymore. This was about something bigger, older, more dangerous. What do we do? Margaret asked. Her voice was steady, but Harold could see her hands shaking. Brick looked at her. We handle it. How? I don't know yet, but I promise you, I swear on my mother's grave, nobody is going to touch you, either of you. Harold believed him. He just wasn't sure believing would be enough. The next 3 days were tense. Brick posted guards on Maple Avenue. Not visible. The Hells Angels knew how to be subtle when they needed to be. But there. Watching. Waiting. Harold saw them sometimes. A motorcycle parked at the end of the street. A figure in a leather vest walking past the house at odd hours. It should have made him feel safer. It didn't. You're not sleeping, Margaret said on the 3rd night. Neither are you. I asked first. Harold stared at the ceiling. I keep thinking about what could happen. If Webb sends people here, if they catch us alone. The bikers won't let that happen. They can't be here every second of every day. Margaret rolled onto her side, facing him. Harold, look at me. He looked. We've survived worse than this. We survived your accident. We survived Tommy's divorce. We survived losing your parents and my parents, and 3 miscarriages that nearly broke us both. Her voice caught, but she pushed through. We're survivors, Harold Mitchell. We don't give up. We don't lie down. We fight. I'm tired of fighting. Then rest, and let someone else fight for us for once. She took his hand. That's what family does. Harold's eyes burned. When did you become so wise? 70 years of practice, remember? He pulled her close. They didn't sleep, but they held each other until dawn. On day 4, Derek came to Harold with an idea. I want to turn myself in. Harold stared at him. Turn yourself in? To who? To Webb. I'll go to him. Tell him I'll work off the debt, whatever it takes. Just please don't let him hurt you because of me. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Mr. Mitchell, you think Webb is going to let you work off $15,000? You think he's going to shake your hand and say, Sure, kid, no problem. Derek's face crumpled. Then what do I do? I caused this. I brought this to your door. The least you can do is shut up and let us handle it. Harold grabbed the boy's arm. You want to make this right? Then stop being a martyr and start being useful. Brick needs information. Everything you know about Webb, his operation, his people. Can you give him that? Derek nodded slowly. Good. Then do it. And stop trying to sacrifice yourself. That's not courage. That's cowardice. Derek blinked. Cowardice? Running away from your problems is easy. Facing them is hard. You want to be a man? Face them. The boy was quiet for a long moment. Then something changed in his eyes. Something hardened. Yes, sir. Good. Now get out of my sight. I need my morning coffee. Derek left. Margaret appeared in the doorway. That was harsh. He needed to hear it. Did he? Or did you need to say it? Harold paused. Both, he admitted. Margaret smiled. That's my husband. Day 5 brought visitors. Harold was on the porch when the black SUV pulled up. 2 men stepped out. Big, suited, faces like concrete walls. Harold's hand tightened on his cane. Mr. Mitchell? The first man approached. Marcus Webb would like to speak with you. Is that so? He's in the vehicle. He'd appreciate a moment of your time. Harold glanced at the SUV, tinted windows, engine running. Tell Mr. Webb if he wants to talk, he can come to my porch like a civilized person. The man's jaw twitched. Mr. Mitchell, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly. I'm 72 years old with a bad back and worse knees. I'm not walking anywhere. If your boss has something to say, he can say it to my face. The 2 men exchanged looks. Then the SUV's back door opened. Marcus Webb was not what Harold expected. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit. He looked like a banker, not a loan shark. He walked up to Harold's porch with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Mitchell, I've heard so much about you. Funny, I've heard nothing about you until recently. Webb's smile flickered. Straight to the point. I respect that. He clasped his hands behind his back. I believe you know why I'm here. I have an idea. Derek Lawson owes me money, a substantial amount, and I've been very patient. Patient? Harold's voice was flat. You call threatening an elderly couple patient? Threats? Webb's eyebrows rose. I made no threats. I simply expressed concern for certain outcomes. Cut the crap. Webb's smile disappeared. Very well, Derek owes me $15,000. I want it, and I don't particularly care where it comes from. So you're here to shake down a 72-year-old man and his 70-year-old wife? I'm here to collect what's owed. We don't owe you anything. No, Webb leaned closer, but Derek does, and he's connected to you, which makes you collateral. Harold's grip on his cane tightened. Get off my property, Mr. Mitchell. Now. Webb studied him for a long moment. You're brave, I'll give you that. Most people crumble when they see me. I've faced worse than you. Have you? Webb glanced at the house. Is your wife home? Margaret, isn't it? I'd hate for her to get caught in the middle of... Harold moved faster than his broken body should have allowed. His cane came up, pressing against Webb's throat, forcing the man back a step. You mentioned my wife's name again, Harold said quietly, and I will beat you to death on this porch. I don't care what happens after. I don't care about your men or your money or your threats. You touch her, you look at her, you even think about her, and I will end you. Webb's eyes widened. For just a second, Harold saw fear there, real fear. Then it was gone, replaced by something cold. You've made a mistake, old man. Maybe, but you've made a bigger one. The motorcycles came from nowhere. 7 engines, 7 riders. They surrounded the SUV like wolves circling prey. Brick dismounted first. Webb, his voice was ice. Long time. Webb straightened, smoothing his suit. Thompson, I was wondering when you'd show up. I'm here now, and you're leaving. Am I? Brick stepped forward until he was inches from Webb's face. You have 10 seconds to get in your car and drive away. If I ever see you on this street again, if I ever hear you've threatened these people again, I will find you, and I will finish what we started 6 years ago. Webb's jaw tightened. You don't have the resources for a war. Try me. The two men stared at each other. Something passed between them. History, hatred, the memory of blood. Finally, Webb stepped back. This isn't over. It is for today. Webb turned and walked to his SUV. His men followed. The engine started. The SUV pulled away. Harold's legs gave out. Brick caught him before he hit the ground. Easy, old man. I got you. I threatened him. Harold's voice was shaking. I put my cane to his throat. What was I thinking? You were thinking like a husband, like a man. Brick helped him to a chair. You did good. He's going to come back. Probably. He's going to hurt us. No, Brick's voice hardened. He's not, because we're going to hurt him first. That night, the Hells Angels gathered in Harold's living room. Not just the usual 7, 15, 20. Leather vests and tattoos filling every corner of the small house. Margaret made coffee. 3 pots. 4. Nobody talked about the elephant in the room until Brick stood up. You all know why we're here. Marcus Webb has made a threat against this family. Against our family. The room rumbled with anger. 6 years ago, Webb put 3 of our brothers in the hospital. We let it go because we didn't have the strength to finish him. We were weak then. Brick's eyes swept the room. We're not weak now. Razor stood up. What's the play? We hit him where it hurts. His money. His operations. We make it more expensive to keep this feud going than to walk away. That could take weeks. Then it takes weeks. We've got time. Webb doesn't. Why doesn't he? Brick smiled. It wasn't pleasant. Because I know something about Marcus Webb that nobody else knows. Something that could destroy him. The room went silent. 6 years ago, when we were fighting over territory, I discovered that Webb has been laundering money for some very powerful people. Politicians, business leaders, people who would be very unhappy if their names became public. How do you know this? Because his accountant owed me a favor. Brick pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Everything is on here. Names, dates, amounts, enough to put Webb away for life and take half the city council with him. Harold stared at the flash drive. You've had this for 6 years? I was saving it for the right moment. Brick looked at him. This is the right moment. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to give Webb a choice. He walks away from you, from Derek, from everyone connected to this, or I give this drive to every news outlet in Texas. Viper stepped forward. That's risky. Webb might call your bluff. Then it won't be a bluff. Brick, I'm done playing games with this man. Brick's voice rose. He threatened Harold. He threatened Margaret. He came to their home and tried to intimidate them. He turned to face the room. We protect our own, whatever the cost. That's what the angels do. That's what we've always done. Hear, hear! The chorus was deafening. Harold felt something shift in his chest. Pride, gratitude, love. These men, these supposed criminals, were willing to go to war for him, for Margaret, for family. Brick, Harold's voice was hoarse. Brick turned. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, old man. Thank me when this is over. The meeting with Webb was set for 3 days later. Neutral ground. An abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. Both sides agreed to bring minimal security. Harold insisted on coming. Absolutely not, Brick said. This started because of me. I should be there when it ends. This started because of Derek. You're just caught in the middle. I don't care. I'm coming. Margaret grabbed Harold's arm. Harold, please, you're back. I know my back, Margaret. I've lived with it for 30 years. He looked at Brick. I need to see this through. I need to know it's really over. Brick studied him for a long moment. Fine, but you stay behind me, and if things go south, you run. Understand? I understand. I mean it, Harold. If shooting starts, I'll run, I promise. Brick nodded slowly. All right, we leave at midnight. The warehouse was cold. Harold stood behind Brick, flanked by Razor and Tank. His cane felt inadequate against the weight of the moment. Webb arrived with 4 men, suited, armed. Thompson, Webb's voice echoed in the empty space. You wanted to talk. Talk. Brick stepped forward. I have something that belongs to you. He held up the flash drive. Webb's face went pale. Where did you get that? Doesn't matter. What matters is what's on it. Brick's voice was steady. Names, dates, amounts, everything you've worked so hard to keep hidden. You're bluffing. Brick tossed the drive to Webb. Webb caught it, stared at it like it might explode. Go ahead, Brick said. Check it. I'll wait. One of Webb's men produced a laptop. Plugged in the drive, Webb's face grew paler with every passing second. How? His voice was barely a whisper. Like I said, doesn't matter. If you release this, I won't. As long as you walk away. Webb looked up. Walk away? From the Mitchells, from Derek, from everyone connected to this mess. You forget they exist. You forget we exist. And this drive stays buried. And if I refuse, then every news station in Texas gets a copy by morning. And your friends in high places start wondering if you're a liability. Webb's jaw tightened. You destroy yourself too. The angels aren't clean. We're cleaner than you think, and we've got nothing to lose. Brick stepped closer. You do. The silence stretched. Harold could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Finally, Webb spoke. I want guarantees. What kind? I want your word, your personal word, that this drive never sees the light of day. You have it. And the 15,000? Forgiven. Derek's debt is cleared. Webb's face contorted. That money is nothing compared to what you stand to lose. Brick's voice hardened. Take the deal, Webb. Walk away. This is the only offer you're going to get. Another long silence. Then Webb laughed. A bitter, broken sound. You win, Thompson. This time. This is the last time. If I ever see you near those people again, you won't. Webb pocketed the flash drive. Consider them forgotten. He turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he paused. Thompson. Yeah? Your mother would be proud of you. Brick went rigid. You don't get to talk about my mother. I knew her, you know. Before she married your father, she was something special. Get out. Webb smiled. See you around, Thompson. He left. The warehouse fell silent. Harold felt his legs shaking. From cold, from fear, from relief. It was over. It was finally over. The ride back to Maple Avenue was quiet. Harold sat behind Brick on the motorcycle, arms wrapped around the giant's waist, wind whipping against his face. He should have been cold. He wasn't. When they pulled up to the house, Margaret was waiting on the porch. She ran down the steps and threw herself into Harold's arms. Is it over? Is it really over? It's over, Harold said. Webb is gone. He won't be back. Margaret burst into tears. Derek appeared behind her, Kyle beside him. Mr. Mitchell? Derek's voice was small. I'm so sorry for everything. It's done. Harold looked at the boy. It's all done. You're free. Derek's face crumpled. He dropped to his knees on the lawn and sobbed. Kyle knelt beside him, arm around his shoulders. And Harold Mitchell, 72 years old, bad back, broken legs, stubborn as hell, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. Brick dismounted his bike. You okay, old man? Harold turned to face him. I'm better than okay. He held out his hand. Thank you for everything. Brick shook it. Any time. I mean it, Brick. You saved our lives multiple times. I don't know how to repay that. You already have. Brick glanced at Margaret, at Derek and Kyle, at the house with the rose garden and the new door and the repaired fence. You gave us a reason to be better. That's payment enough. Harold's eyes burned. You want to come inside? Margaret's probably already making coffee. Brick smiled. I thought you'd never ask. They walked up the porch steps together. The door closed behind them, and on Maple Avenue, under a sky full of stars, the night finally felt safe. 6 months to the day, Harold stood in his backyard, watching Derek and Kyle load the last of their tools into Kyle's battered pickup truck. The shed gleamed with fresh paint. The fence stood solid and proud. Every repair they'd promised, and dozens more they hadn't, complete. Their sentence was over. Mr. Mitchell? Derek approached slowly, cap in his hands. He wasn't the same kid who'd kicked down Harold's door all those months ago. The arrogance was gone. The swagger had died. In its place stood a young man with calloused hands and honest eyes. Derek, I wanted to say thank you for everything, for not giving up on us, for seeing something worth saving. Harold studied the boy's face. You did the work, not me. No, Derek shook his head. You gave us the chance. Most people would have let Brick kill us, would have called the cops, would have done anything except what you did. What did I do? You treated us like human beings, even when we didn't deserve it. Harold's throat tightened. Everyone deserves a second chance, Derek. The question is what you do with it. Derek nodded slowly. I got a job at a construction company downtown. Turns out I'm pretty good with my hands when I'm not using them to hurt people. That's so? Yeah, Kyle too. We're sharing an apartment, trying to save money. Do things right this time. I'm glad. Derek hesitated. Can I still come by? Sometimes? Not to work, just to visit? Harold felt something warm spread through his chest. Margaret makes coffee every morning at 7. Doors always open. Derek's face lit up. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Call me Harold. Yes, sir. Yes, Harold. The kid practically glowed as he walked back to the truck. Margaret appeared at Harold's side. You're getting soft. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She slipped her hand into his. They're good boys, underneath all that stupidity. You said that before too. Because it keeps being true. They watched the pickup truck pull away from the curb. Derek waved from the passenger window. Kyle honked twice. Then they were gone. And Harold Mitchell felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Pride. Not for himself, for them. The following Sunday was different. Harold knew something was wrong the moment Brick walked through the door. The giant's face was pale. His hands weren't steady. Brick? Margaret set down her coffee cup. What's wrong? Brick stood in the middle of the living room, not sitting, not speaking. Brick. Harold pushed himself up from his chair. Talk to us. Viper's sick. The words fell like stones. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. What? We got the results yesterday. Cancer. Stage 3. It's in her lungs. Harold felt the floor shift beneath him. Brick. She's been coughing for months. We thought it was allergies. The smoke from the bikes. Something minor. Brick's voice cracked. It's not minor. Margaret crossed the room and wrapped her arms around the massive biker. Brick stood frozen for a moment. Then his shoulders began to shake. This man, this giant covered in tattoos and scars, this leader of outlaws, this force of nature, crumbled in Margaret's arms like a child. I can't lose her, he gasped. I can't. She's everything. She's my whole world. Shh. Margaret held him tighter. It's okay. Let it out. Let it all out. Harold watched, helpless. He thought of Viper, her sharp wit, her fierce loyalty, the way she'd examined Margaret's bruises with gentle fingers, like a mother caring for her child. And now she was dying. Life was cruel. Life was so goddamn cruel. "What can we do?" Harold asked quietly. "Tell us what you need." Brick pulled back from Margaret's embrace. His eyes were red. His face was wet. "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan." "Then we make one together." Harold gripped his cane. "That's what family does." Brick stared at him. "Family? You saved my wife's life. You protected our home. You stood between us and everyone who wanted to hurt us." Harold's voice strengthened. "If that's not family, I don't know what is." Brick was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay." His voice was hoarse. "Okay, together." The next 2 weeks were a blur. The Hells Angels rallied around Viper with a ferocity that surprised no one who knew them. They researched treatments. They found specialists. They raised money through means Harold decided not to ask about. And every evening, without fail, someone from the crew came to the Mitchells' house. Demon brought updates on Viper's condition. Razor handled logistics, appointments, medications, transportation. Tank cooked meals, so many meals that Margaret's freezer overflowed. And Scraps, quiet, skinny Scraps, sat with Harold on the porch and talked about his grandmother. How she'd had cancer too. How she'd fought for 3 years before finally letting go. "She never stopped smiling," Scraps said one evening. "Even at the end. She said dying was just another adventure." Harold studied the young man's face. "You miss her." "Every day." Scraps was quiet for a moment. "But I see her sometimes. In other people. The way they laugh. The way they care about strangers." He looked at Harold. "I see her in you, Mr. Mitchell." Harold didn't know what to say. "She would have liked you," Scraps continued. "She would have said you have a good soul." "I'm just an old man with a bad back." "You're more than that. You know you are." Harold's eyes burned. "Thank you, Scraps. Thank you for letting us be part of your family." They sat in silence as the sun set over Maple Avenue, and somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle engine hummed. Viper started treatment on a Thursday. Chemotherapy, radiation, the full arsenal of modern medicine thrown at the disease, eating her from the inside. She handled it like she handled everything, with fire and defiance. "I'm not dying in some hospital bed," she announced after her first session, surrounded by the crew in Harold's living room. "When I go, I'm going on the back of Brick's bike, wind in my hair, middle finger raised at the whole world." "You're not going anywhere," Brick growled. "Damn right I'm not, but when I do, and we all do eventually, that's how I want it." "Viper, Brick," she took his face in her hands. "I love you. I've loved you for 23 years, and I'll love you for however many years I have left. But I need you to let me handle this my way." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not hiding. I'm not pretending. I'm going to fight this bastard disease with everything I have. And when I'm not fighting, I'm going to live. Really live. Not sit around feeling sorry for myself." Her eyes swept the room. "That goes for all of you. No sad faces. No walking on eggshells. We eat, we drink, we laugh, we ride. We do what we've always done. Understood?" "Understood," the crew murmured. "I can't hear you." "Understood," Viper grinned. "That's my boys." The weeks turned into months. Viper's hair fell out. She shaved what remained and bought a collection of bandanas that would make a pirate jealous. Her weight dropped. She joked about finally fitting into her wedding dress again. Her energy waned, but her spirit never did. And through it all, the Sunday gatherings continued. 20 people crammed into Harold and Margaret's small house. Bikers and neighbors, old and young, healthy and sick. Mrs. Patterson brought her famous apple pie. Mr. Wallace told war stories that made everyone laugh and cry. The Nguyen kids ran circles around the adults, shrieking with joy. And in the center of it all, Viper sat like a queen, surrounded by her family. "You know what I realized?" she said one Sunday, glass of wine in her hand. I've spent my whole life being afraid. Afraid? Demon laughed. Boss, you're the scariest person I know. Afraid of dying. Afraid of losing the people I love. Afraid of being alone. She took a sip of wine. But sitting here, looking at all of you, I'm not afraid anymore. Why not? Because I know you'll take care of each other. When I'm gone, whenever that is, you'll still have each other. This family will survive. Brick's hand found hers. You're not going anywhere. Everyone goes somewhere, baby, but some of us are lucky enough to know we mattered before we do. Her eyes found Harold across the room. Thank you, she mouthed. Harold nodded, throat too tight for words. Tommy arrived the following weekend. Harold watched his son's car pull up, watched him step out and pause at the sight of 7 motorcycles lining the curb. Still weird, Tommy muttered, walking up the porch steps. Still your parents' house. Yeah, Tommy hugged him briefly. How's Viper? Fighting, like always. Good, she's tough. The toughest. They walked inside together. Margaret was in the kitchen with Tank, arguing about the proper way to roast a chicken. Demon and Scraps were teaching the Nguyen kids a card game that may or may not have involved cheating. Brick sat in the corner with Viper, heads bent together, whispering things only they could hear. Tommy stood in the doorway, taking it all in. This is insane, he said quietly. You've said that before, because it keeps being true. But there was no judgment in his voice anymore, just wonder. How did you do it, Dad? Do what? Build this. A few months ago, you and Mom were 2 lonely people living in a house too big for them. Now look at this place. Harold looked, really looked. He saw faces he'd come to love, voices he'd come to need, people who had started as strangers and become family. I didn't build anything, Harold said. I just opened the door. That's the hardest part sometimes. Harold turned to his son. When did you become so wise? Tommy grinned. I learned from the best. Viper collapsed on a Tuesday. Harold got the call at 3:17 p.m. Brick's voice, barely recognizable. She's in the hospital. It spread. It's everywhere now. We're coming. Harold, we're coming. He hung up and turned to Margaret. Get your coat. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear. Harold hated hospitals, had hated them ever since his accident, when he'd spent 8 months in a bed, learning to walk again, learning to live with pain that never fully went away. But today wasn't about him. Today was about Viper. They found Brick in the waiting room. The giant sat alone, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Margaret went to him immediately. Harold stayed back, giving them space. Demon appeared beside him. It's bad, Mr. Mitchell. The doctors say, they say it's weeks, maybe days. Does she know? Yeah, she knows. How is she handling it? Demon laughed, a wet, broken sound. She told the doctor to stop looking at her like she was already dead. Said she'd outlive him out of spite. Harold smiled despite himself. That's Viper. Yeah, that's Viper. They let Harold in to see her at 5 p.m. She looked small in the hospital bed, smaller than he'd ever seen her. The fierce woman who'd examined Margaret's bruises, who'd stood beside Brick at every gathering, who'd faced down loan sharks without flinching. She looked fragile now, breakable. But her eyes were the same, sharp, defiant, alive. Harold, her voice was a rasp. Get over here. He limped to her bedside, sat in the chair Brick had vacated. You look terrible, he said. You're one to talk. She coughed, winced. Heard you came as soon as Brick called. Of course. Why? Harold blinked. What do you mean, why? You barely know me. We've shared maybe 20 conversations total. Why drop everything to come sit beside a dying woman's bed? Harold was quiet for a long moment. Because you're family, he said finally, and family shows up. Viper stared at him. Then her eyes filled with tears. Damn it, Harold. I was trying so hard not to cry. Sorry. No, you're not. No, I'm not. She laughed. It turned into a cough. The cough turned into gasping. Harold grabbed her hand and held on until it passed. Thank you, Viper whispered, for everything, for letting us into your home, for treating us like human beings, for seeing past the leather and the tattoos and the reputation. Thank you for saving my wife's life. That was Brick. It was all of you, every single one. Viper squeezed his hand. Take care of him, Harold, when I'm gone. He's going to fall apart, and he's going to need people to put him back together. I will. Promise me. I promise. She nodded slowly. Good. Her eyes were closing. I think I'll sleep now. Don't leave, okay? Stay with me. I'm not going anywhere. Good. That's good. Her breathing steadied. Harold sat beside her, holding her hand, watching her chest rise and fall. And somewhere in his heart, something shifted. A piece of armor he didn't know he'd been wearing fell away. Viper passed 3 days later, peacefully, in her sleep, Brick holding her hand. The funeral was the following Saturday. Harold had never seen so many motorcycles in one place. They lined the streets for blocks. Hundreds of leather-clad riders come to pay their respects to a woman who had been mother, sister, friend to all of them. Brick spoke at the service. His voice broke 17 times. Harold counted, but he finished. Viper was the best of us, Brick said, standing before a crowd that stretched to the horizon. She saw beauty in broken things. She found family in strangers. She loved fiercely and forgave freely and never, ever gave up on anyone. He paused. She taught me how to be human again. After years of being a monster, she reminded me what it meant to care about something bigger than myself. His eyes found Harold in the crowd. And in the last months of her life, she found a new family. An old man with a bad back and his wife of 43 years. Strangers who became friends. Friends who became family. Brick's voice steadied. That's Viper's legacy. Not the fights she won or the enemies she made. The connections she built. The people she brought together. The love she left behind. He raised his hand. Ride free, baby. I'll catch up with you someday. The engines roared, all of them, at once. The sound was deafening, overwhelming, like thunder and grief and love all mixed together. Harold stood with Margaret's hand in his, tears streaming down his face, watching the crew send their queen home. The months after Viper's death were hard. Brick disappeared for 2 weeks. No calls, no visits, nothing. Harold worried. Then, on a Sunday morning, the familiar rumble returned. Harold opened the door to find Brick on his porch. Thinner, older, eyes carrying a weight they hadn't before. She told me not to run, Brick said quietly. She made me promise I'd stay connected, that I wouldn't let grief turn me into a ghost. Did you keep that promise? I'm trying to. Brick looked at him. Can I come in? Harold stepped aside. They sat in the living room. Margaret brought coffee. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, Brick broke the silence. I want to do something, in her memory, something that matters. Like what? I don't know yet, but she always talked about helping people, really helping them, not just protecting them from immediate threats, but giving them chances, opportunities. He leaned forward. You and Margaret, you showed us what that looks like. You took Derek and Kyle, 2 kids who had every reason to stay broken, and you helped them become something better. They did the work. You gave them the chance. Brick's eyes were intense. I want to give more people that chance. In Viper's name. Harold considered this. What are you thinking? I don't know yet. A foundation, maybe. Something that helps at-risk youth, gives them structure, purpose, someone to believe in them. That's a big undertaking. I know. Brick smiled weakly. But Viper always said I needed a hobby. Harold laughed. It felt strange to laugh. Strange, but necessary. She would have loved that idea, Margaret said softly. I know, Brick's voice cracked. I know she would. The foundation launched 6 months later. They called it the Viper's Wings Foundation, a program for at-risk youth, connecting them with mentors, job training, second chances. Derek and Kyle were the first volunteers. We know what it's like to be lost, Derek told the crowd at the launch event. We know what it's like to make terrible choices and think there's no way back. But there is. There's always a way back. He looked at Harold. You just need someone willing to show you the door. The foundation grew. 10 kids in the first year, 50 in the second. By the third year, Viper's Wings had chapters in 3 states. Harold and Margaret never missed a board meeting. Brick never missed a Sunday dinner. And Maple Avenue, that quiet suburban street where an old man had once screamed for help, became known for something else entirely. Home. Harold Mitchell turned 75 on a Saturday in June. The party filled the entire backyard. Neighbors, bikers, foundation kids, Derek and Kyle, now with wives and children of their own, Tommy and his family, the Nguyen's, the Hendersons, even Mrs. Patterson, who had long since been forgiven. Speech, someone shouted. Harold, speech. Harold tried to wave them off. Brick appeared beside him. Come on, old man. You know they won't let you off the hook. Harold sighed, grabbed his cane, pushed himself to his feet. The crowd fell silent. I'm not good at speeches, he began. Margaret will tell you that. I proposed to her with a handwritten note because I couldn't get the words out. Laughter rippled through the yard. But I want to say something, to all of you. He looked at the faces surrounding him, friends, family, strangers, who had become both. 3 years ago, I was a bitter old man, living in a house that felt too empty. I'd given up on people, given up on the world. I thought my best days were behind me. He paused. Then 2 criminals broke into my home and beat my wife. The yard went still. It was the worst day of my life. I stood in the middle of that street, screaming for help, and not a single person came. I thought I was alone. I thought nobody cared. His voice strengthened. I was wrong. He looked at Brick. 7 men on motorcycles stopped their bikes and changed everything. They didn't know me. They didn't owe me anything. But they saw someone in pain, and they helped. That's what the angels do, Demon called out. That's what family does, Harold corrected. And that's what you've all become. Not just the bikers, all of you. The neighbors who finally opened their doors. The kids who proved that second chances work. The friends who showed up when it mattered. He raised his cane. I'm 75 years old today. My back still hurts. My legs still don't work right. But I've never felt richer. Because I learned something in these past 3 years that I should have known all along. He looked at Margaret, his wife of 46 years now, his partner, his anchor, his everything. We're not meant to be alone. We're meant to need each other, to help each other, to see each other, really see each other, past the tattoos and the age and the mistakes and the fear. His voice dropped. Viper knew that. She saw it in all of us before we saw it in ourselves. And I think she's watching right now, glass of wine in her hand, telling us all to stop being so damn serious and eat some cake. Hear, hear. Brick's voice was thick. That's exactly what she'd say. The crowd erupted in cheers. Margaret stood and kissed Harold on the cheek. Beautiful, she whispered. You're beautiful. Charmer. Always. The party lasted until midnight. Harold sat on his porch watching the last guests leave. Brick was helping Margaret carry dishes inside. Demon and Scraps were loading folding chairs into a truck. Derek approached slowly. Mr. Mitchell? Harold. Right, Harold. Derek sat on the step beside him. Thank you for everything. You've thanked me about 1,000 times. Because I mean it 1,000 times. Derek was quiet for a moment. My daughter's first word was flower, because of Margaret's garden, because we bring her here every week. Harold felt something warm in his chest. She's a good kid. She's better than I deserve. Derek looked at him. But I'm trying to deserve her. Every day. That's what you taught me. I didn't teach you anything. I just opened the door. I know, Derek smiled. But sometimes that's the hardest part. Harold looked at the young man sitting beside him. Not a criminal anymore. Not a thug. A father. A husband. A volunteer at a foundation that helped kids just like him. A good man. You're going to be okay, Derek. I know, Derek stood, because of people like you. He walked to his car where his wife and daughter waited. Harold watched them drive away. Then he stood, grabbed his cane, and walked inside. Margaret was waiting in the kitchen. Everyone's gone, she said. I know. It's just us now. I know. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around him. Happy birthday, Harold Mitchell. Happy birthday to me. 75 years, you're officially ancient. I've been ancient since 50. She laughed. That laugh he'd loved for 46 years. That laugh he'd crossed streets and screamed his lungs out and welcomed strangers into his home for. Harold, yeah? Thank you. For what? For not giving up. That day 3 years ago, when everything fell apart, you could have stayed inside. You could have hidden like everyone else. But you didn't. You went out into that street and you screamed for help. Her voice broke. You screamed for me. Harold held her tighter. I'd scream for you every day for the rest of my life. I know. She pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. I know you would. They stood there in the kitchen, two people who had survived more than most, holding each other like the world depended on it. Because in a way, it did. Their world, their family, their home. Brick appeared in the doorway. Hey, the guys are heading out. You need anything else before we go? Harold looked at him. This man who had started as a stranger, who had become a protector, a friend, a son almost. Same time next Sunday? Brick grinned. Same time every Sunday, you know that. Just checking. Brick walked over and hugged them both. His massive arms wrapped around Harold and Margaret like they were the most precious things in the world. Because to him, they were. Ride safe, Harold said. Always. Brick left. The motorcycles roared to life outside. Harold and Margaret walked to the porch, hands intertwined, and watched the Hells Angels ride away into the night. 7 bikes, 7 friends, 7 brothers, family. The street fell silent. The stars came out, and Harold Mitchell, 75 years old, bad back, broken legs, heart fuller than it had ever been, looked at his wife and smiled. You're smiling again, Margaret said. I know. It looks good on you. Everything looks good on me. Now who's the charmer? Harold kissed her, not a quick peck, a real kiss. The kind they'd shared on their wedding day, 46 years ago, when the world was young and everything seemed possible. The world was older now, but everything still seemed possible. They walked inside together, closing the door on another day. Tomorrow there would be more coffee, more visitors, more laughter and tears and all the beautiful chaos of a life well lived. But tonight, there was just this. 2 people, 1 love, and a home that had grown from a house into something far more precious. On Maple Avenue, the lights went out one by one. The neighborhood slept, and Harold Mitchell finally understood what he'd been searching for his whole life. Not safety, not peace, not even happiness. Connection. The simple, profound, irreplaceable truth that we are not meant to walk through this world alone. That strangers can become family. That broken people can heal each other. That it's never too late to open your door and let someone in. Viper had known it. Brick had learned it. Derek and Kyle had lived it. And Harold Mitchell, a 75-year-old man with a bad back and a cane, and a wife he'd loved for 46 years, had finally, completely, eternally understood it. We are not alone. We were never meant to be. And in the end, that's the only thing that matters. That is the only thing that will ever matter.